Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Mark Moyer, author of Win Again, speaker, career coach, and business advisor. And I help athletes, executives, and entrepreneurs reach their fullest potential. What you're going to be hearing in every single episode are conversations with athletes and other sports-related influencers. And we'll be offering you the insight that you need to succeed in life, including advice that will let you jump past your competition, whether it be for a great new job or taking your business to a much, much higher level. Make sure to connect with me on social media at Mark Moyer Coach and go to my website, markmoyer.com, to get access to the tips and strategies that my coaching clients get directly. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email to mark@markmoyer.com and I'll get you going right away. Thanks for joining me today. It's going to be an awesome episode. Now, are you ready to make your mark? Let's do this. Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. My name is Mark Moyer and I'm broadcasting to you live from New York City. And I'm super excited to have you on board wherever you're listening. If it's here in New York, anywhere else in the country, or Canada or Mexico or any other countries on the planet, thanks for being here. And I'm super excited because I just finished an amazing conversation with Chris Hale. And Chris played for the Buffalo Bills. He played for a bunch of other teams in the NFL. Super guy. Great stories about how he overcame really a lot of challenges to make it into the NFL. But more importantly, we also talk about what he's done since then and really advice on how to make that transition and how to leverage your athletic mindset and skill set into great opportunities after your career. This is one you really shouldn't miss. Give it a listen. But before you do, click on that subscribe button wherever it is on your screen and listen to the other episodes. I've had 50 guests so far. They all bring so much to the table. You really need to listen to all of their opinions. It's great conversations I've had. Go to my website anytime, markmoyer.com, for access to lots of great content about how to take your business and your career to a whole new level. You can also grab a copy of my book, my business, really it's a playbook for athletes making that transition. It's called Win Again. You can grab that on Amazon, go to my website, everywhere else to check it out. And just tons of great content everywhere. And in fact, if you listen to this whole entire episode, for the first 20 people that can answer a question that I will ask you afterwards, I'll send you a free copy of the book. So make sure you listen to this episode, reach out to me, mark@markmoyer.com, and I'll tell you what question you need to answer to win a copy of the book for free. Happy listening. Welcome to Make Your Mark podcast. My name is Mark Moyer and I'm super duper, I don't know how many dupers I'll throw in there. Excited to have Chris on board today. Chris is amazing. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. And he's got to now match up that amazingness right now. Chris, where the heck are you, first of all? Where are you recording from? Where are you?
I'm in California. I'm deep in Southern California, close to Pasadena, outside of Los Angeles.
And you've been there, I think you were born and raised there kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Outside of playing in various cities around the country, this is where I've made my home, Southern California. It's hard to beat. We have no snow.
Well, you do. It's not too far away in Mount Baldy. I remember I used to, when I spent a year out in LA, I would go, I thought it was very cool actually to be able to be on the beach, in a few minutes that way, and then up on Mount Baldy just like an hour that way. And that was pretty wild.
The funny thing is, I would say it was very costly because of that, but it's not as costly as New York City, because here in California, you can be anywhere within an hour. And that's one of our mantras here in LA, is the fact that, you can be in Mount Baldy in an hour. You can be at the beach in an hour. You can be in the mountains in an hour.
That's only if you drive at 2 a.m. Any other time out there, you're stuck in traffic. I mean, God bless you, but you know what? Everybody in LA has to be really chill and relaxed and stuff because it's too stressful. That traffic is insane.
It is insane. You're right about that. Yeah, it can't be any worse than New York City, though. It can't be worse than Times Square.
Most of us, we kind of either hoof it or we take a subway or whatever it is, and we're the difference. And I'm not trying to do a New York versus LA battle because there's really no battle.
It's a rap battle. It's a rap battle.
But yeah, East Coast, West Coast. But what I thought was really interesting when I was out and when we met a few weeks ago was that everything in LA seems like it's either 7 miles or 21 miles away. And everything is, if you're 7 miles, that's either like 8 to 12 minutes or it's an hour and a half.
That's exactly what it is.
And you have to, but Uber is cheaper. Although
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Uber, but it had to be the way I had to do it when I was out there. But
You
anyway.
should take a Lyft. You should take Lyft. If you don't like
Oh,
Uber, you take Lyft. There's other and it's not like taxis. So they can't keep charging you for driving around the corner. So it's not a bad thing.
by the way, this podcast is not sponsored by Uber or Lyft or any of the other ones. Anyway, well, look, Chris, I'm super thrilled to have you on board. We got a lot to cover in a short amount of time, but I'm fired up because number one, I went out deep into my closet, not that deep, and found my Eli Manning Super Bowl 2008 jersey, which for those Patriot fans who thought they were going to go 18-0, they did not. It was basically the greatest game in the history of mankind. And I will admit that when I attended it, and there was a planes, trains, and automobiles to get there, it was really hilarious with my two buddies. We did not have, fancy accommodations or all this other stuff, but we honestly thought we were going to get our butts kicked because the Patriots were, creaming everybody and whatever. So we were prepared for that. So when it didn't happen and we won, it was kind of like, we're still sort of stunned over that, but it was a great experience. All right, but enough about me and Eli and the greatness that is the New York Giants sometimes.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about you, Chris, because yes, you played in the NFL. You had the NFL experience. You've also done a lot of work with the NFL since that time in a variety of ways. But I want you to rewind the tape a little bit and tell me a little bit about what, number one, in the first place, got you into football. What made you wake up one day, but you said, you know what, I'm going to play the game. And tell me a little bit about your sort of the first set of years through high school.
Yeah, well, it started long before high school. It started about when I was about 9 years old, and I decided to play sports at all. First of all, I was a huge sports fan growing up. So let's say 9 years old, when I'd wake up on Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings, I'm watching football. And my dad knew I was watching football. He was into it as well. Everybody in my family's into sports, but just the fact that I just fell in love with this game from the very onset of which I could remember anything happening in my life. And so I was, believe it or not, a big, huge O.J. Simpson fan back in those days. And this is right after he was out of college football. But so I started playing in the local league that is in my area. And amazingly, I was a big, because I have an older brother, I think, we roughhouse a lot. My dad was a boxer back in those days. I think I was kind of a rough kid. And so I love the aggressiveness of football. And just, it was just something that I figured at 9 years old that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, it doesn't last for the rest of your life, but that was what I wanted to do for a profession. And so my mindset from 9 years old was to be a football player. So it's kind of crazy. As I grew up, I fell in love with it more and more. I became a student of the game, and on through high school. And there's many stories I could go on and through high school, but it just amazingly, and it's very rare, it as well as anybody, that I had an opportunity to be a professional, but that's sort of what happened. God gave me open door, and I went right through it.
Well, and what's interesting about what you just said is that I think most non-professional athletes, they kind of feel that, well, to be a professional athlete is basically an impossible task. And what they sort of don't necessarily realize is that, if you have the right mindset and the right athletic skill set, it's I don't want to say it's not as hard as people think, but it's not an insurmountable thing, because in your case, you weren't necessarily, what do they always say, that something about, if you're 6'5", that's like you can't teach height, right? Or you can't teach size.
Right. Yeah.
But what makes your situation way more compelling and interesting is that you had to battle against some of those, whether it's
Odds
and, people looking at you and saying, wow, there's no way this guy's going to play. And you showed them. So when you were in high school and you were playing, was there a point where you kind of said, you know what, this might happen? or did it not happen until college, or
No, it didn't happen for a very long time. So like I said, there's a lot of stories that go with it.
Yep.
So when I was in high school, even getting a scholarship, because I was probably 5'6" in high school, 145 pounds as a senior. So I was a very small high school player. Although I was very good as a high school player, and I don't want to brag on myself, but I was pretty good. Nobody really wanted to look at me because everybody said I was too small. And so I remember one of my big motivating stories was the fact that there were some guys getting recruited to go to New Mexico, and New Mexico State, actually. And I keep getting a phone call. It's from Eric Dickerson, but can you believe that?
Tell Eric Dickerson you're a little bit tied
Yeah,
up right now. The Hall of Famers gotta wait.
yeah, Hall of Famers gotta wait. And so he's called me like twice. So what happened with the New Mexico State coach is I led the league in interceptions, and I walked up to him one day, and he was there at my high school to recruit another one of the players on my team. And they said, and I said, hey, I led I tapped him on the shoulder, and I said, I led the conference in interceptions. And he said, it's because your team was so good, that your line was so good, that quarterback just threw the ball up. And I thought to myself, that mother, so on and so forth. And so, all those stories are motivating things, or those steps on the ladder to get you going in a certain direction. So when people can tell you no and you're motivated to do something, you just have to be able to do it. And so I did not get a scholarship, believe it or not. I went to the University of Nebraska. I ended up kind of battling my way through no scholarships for high school football. I was a track guy as well.
Okay.
So yeah, and so I was, I was in the state meet since I was a sophomore. So I was, a decent athlete, and I had to kind of fight my way in the football realm to convince people that I could actually do it. And so when I actually went to college, I was a walk-on. I went to college to run track at the University of Nebraska, and I walked on to the football team. And I'm still tiny. And at Nebraska, it was the year after they won the national title. And so Mike Rozier, Turner Gill, all those guys had just left the school. And so they were ranked in the top 10. They were an incredible university. Huge, huge guys on the team. And so I had to test out to get on the team. So they make you do a combine. And there's, on the team in those days, it was a varsity team, it was a JV team. So there was over 150 guys on the team. And so they make you do the combine test. And during the test, I broke their school record as a walk-on. I broke their school record in the vertical leap. And then I went on a team late in the season, or not, I shouldn't say late in the season, early in the season. I got a team, and I was fourth on the depth chart. And so they let me on the team, and I ran fast. I ran a 4.4 for them. And I'm a 17-year-old freshman. And by the end of the season, I ended up playing a lot. I've saved a couple of games for them, and I led the team in interceptions. And I'm still 150 pounds, right? And so I went to the coach and asked him for a full ride scholarship in football. And I said, I want to play football here. And he said, we don't have any available. And so I said, all right. And he said, well, go to your counselor, get your classes. We'll try to make things work. So I went to my counselor to get my the classes. And she said, well, you have $100 phone bill that you have to pay. You can't play, or you can't sign up for any classes until you pay this debt off. And she says, are you gonna, get the money from somebody? I go, no, I'm going home. And I got on a plane, called my mom, got on a plane and went home. And I couldn't handle it. So I came back home and I went to Glendale College, which is a junior college in this community. And I went to practice for the next year. I went to practice for like one day. And I told the coach, I said, you know what? Not into it. I can't play. I'm done with sports. And so I quit. And so I quit for a year, and I realized how much I really loved it. And I wanted to be back and a part of it. And the determination was still there. But for that year, it felt like that. Nobody wanted me. The major factor was my size. It wasn't my skill set. Nobody felt that I could help them. And I felt nobody was on my side. And so I just kind of gave up on it. And I decided, I was going to just go work construction. And so the interesting thing was the next year, I would go out and kind of smell the grass over in the field, and I decided to play one more year. And I know I'm going on and on, but this is a pretty good story. Uh, so I go to Glendale College, and it's a junior college, and I tell the coaches, I sit down with the coaches, and the coaches tell me, listen, Chris, we know you played in Nebraska. We know you had a good year there. We know you're a pretty good athlete. We'll give you every opportunity in the world to play. These were a good set of coaches who just kind of recognized you for who you were, and let all the other things decide themselves.
Right.
And I said, sure, I'll come back to the team. I'll play this year. I have 1 year if I'm going to go to a university. Coach says to me, yeah, you can play with us. He said, but understand, we have two very good guys in your position at cornerback. We have one going to San Diego State on full ride scholarship, and the other one going to Texas A&M. I said, Coach, no problem. Let them play. I'll find my way. Because at that point in my life, I don't think that being a major college star was my priority. Just so happens I start playing, and I start switching off with those two guys. And by, I don't know, week 3 maybe of the season, those two guys are switching off with each other, and I'm alone in my position. And at that point, I think I'm leading the country in interceptions at junior college. And by the time the end of the season came, I was an All-American in junior college. And that's where I felt like at this point, things could actually, show themselves. And so the idea was just to get a full ride scholarship. And so getting a full ride scholarship was the number one thing on my list at that point.
And so how did things, you ended up with the Trojans in SC. How'd that happen?
I ended up with America's team.
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, there's nobody in New York that can say that. Is Syracuse there still? Do they still have a team?
They do.
Yeah.
Frozen solid right now, but they'll be thawing out soon.
So I was highly recruited by it at that point. So, I went to, took my trips to Georgia, Texas A&M, Pitt, Arizona State, and USC. And so I could have went anywhere by then. And things were starting to work out just from that aspect. Never thought about pros at that point. It was a dream of mine, of course, but I never thought about it. And I just was trying to get from 1 year to the next, obviously because of my experiences. And so, my junior season was okay at USC, just kind of getting your feet wet at a major college level. The funny thing is, by my senior year, I felt like such a different person and a different player. The maturity was kicking in, and I started having a great year. And so we played our first game against Boston College out in Boston for the kickoff classic for college football.
Yeah,
I had two interceptions. We absolutely killed. I was, my team's player of the game. I wasn't the ABC player of the game, which I was a little disappointed about, but I was team's player of the game. And I had the hardest position on the field because I only played the wide side of the field.
right.
And I only played man on man with whoever was their best receiver. And at that time, for Boston College, it was Tom Waddle, who ended up having a decent career. Yep. And so then, and so the good thing about me at USC is at that time, most of our games were on television, and we played mostly ranked teams. And so we played Oklahoma. I had 2 interceptions against Oklahoma, and they were number 1 at the time in the country. And so I was ABC Player of the Week, and Pac-12 Player of the Week against Stanford. And so, the season was progressing. And at that point in my life, I felt like this is possible for me, to be a professional athlete. And pay in mind, I don't think it's necessarily hard. I think it's hard work. I think it's diligence. And I think what has to happen, though, too, is there's a lot of luck involved in being a pro athlete, too. Because 1, you can't be injured. 2, everything's got to work out. The other guy may not get as many plays as you. You have to be in the right position to get the plays, or for anything in life. You have to be in the position that things come to you. Right. And how you respond to that is what makes you great, or what puts you on the next level. And so things that were happening to me in college, most plays were coming to me because people love to play the wide side of the field. because there's more room over there.
Sure.
And my response was good and everything was working out. And so I ended up leading the team in interceptions at USC that year, and we had a fantastic team. We ended up number 5 in the country. And Junior Seau was on that team.
Yeah.
Rodney Peete was on that team, and so I had a great year. And so
Wait, time out. So let me ask you a quick question though.
sure.
When you were there, what I want to hear from you now, because this is a big part of my audience are student athletes who are currently, they've been depending on what year they are, but they're deep in their sort of training for their sport, whether it's football or baseball or water polo, whatever it is. And one thing I'd love to hear from you is if you have some advice that you can give a current student athlete on how to really balance the obviously the academic workload that has to be involved with just trying to graduate and so forth, the social life that you have to try to, have, like whether it's dating or just hanging out with friends or whatever it might be. And obviously the big responsibility of being an athlete and all the training that goes on. I mean, what kind of advice, give me, a couple of things that you would give to a student athlete that you would say, look, here's the most important thing to focus on, as you train and so on.
Well, that's the thing. What is the most important thing to you? You have to set your priorities to what's happening in your life. Where do you want to be? What people who are young don't realize that those high school years are years that go by, and me and they go by as fast as heck.
Mm-hmm.
And so your focus can't be on what's going on at the high school. It has to be beyond that high school. What do you see yourself? There's a neighbor of mine growing up that who wanted to play baseball. And I said to him, and he said, I can't balance everything. And I said, let me ask you something. If somebody said to you that you have a chance to be a pro athlete if 2 things happen, if you work hard and you get good grades, because it doesn't seem like it's that hard at the end of the day. It may seem like it's hard when you're in it, but at the end of the day, that's what you have to focus on. And I said, what if you get good grades and work hard at your task? Does anything else matter? Because you're going to have time to be able to hang out here once in a while. You're not going to have all the time in the world, but you're going to have time. So if those 2 things are in place, if they're number 1, do you think that you can do that in order to succeed? And he said, yes. And I said, those are very simple things. So that's where your focus should be. Your focus should be on, if you're a baseball player, football player, water polo player, working hard at your craft, trying to perfect your craft and get good grades. All the other stuff is going to come. It's going to be there for you. Your social life is going to be there because you're going to be able to take a break here and there. It's not going to just be all work. You're going to have plenty of time for that. But if you find yourself engulfed in all the other stuff and doing, if you want to party, then that's probably your top priority. If you want to hang out with your friends, then that's probably your top priority.
Right.
The thing that you have to do is make this situation that's going to get you to the next level. You have to make that your priority, and that's the way you succeed.
That's great. And one of the things that I would add in there is this: when you're an athlete, it's critical to have structure, right? And it's critical to know sort of every day, this is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be waking up at whatever it might be, 6, 7, 8 a.m. I'm going to then, might train for a little bit. But as long as you structure in your day the time and you allocate time that's dedicated to studying and you don't kind of screw around during that time and you really focus on, as you said, it's one thing to just attend classes. It's another thing to actually, and I don't want to just say maybe get good grades, but to really try to learn a little bit. And, all kinds of studies have shown that with athletes, when they use, and I'm not going to get into, I'm not a whatever it is, a specialist or something, obviously.
Specialist.
neuro. But, when you use, obviously you're using part of your brain when you're doing all the athletic stuff, but then other parts are kicked in when you're, let's say, studying something about geology or economics or social study, or whatever it is that you're, in school for. When you actually energize those, it translates to better performance on the field. And people don't always look at it that way. They say, well, I don't have time to study for my biology test. I've got to do these, we're working out with pads today and I got to focus on that. But if you energize the biology side of your brain, you'll see that you'll do much better on the field. And that's, to me, the biggest advice is that also, people say, well, it's, as you were saying too, Chris, that it can be challenging to balance academics, sports, and social. But the social life actually finds a way to kind of creep in there, and it still happens anyway. You don't need to force it. It will still happen. It's
Absolutely.
like, I always talk about after I've had a huge meal and then I want to go to the movies. And I might say, gee, I'm too full for popcorn. But then I always say, the popcorn just fills in the cracks. There's room for popcorn in there. So I don't know if that's a great analogy.
No, that's a great analogy, actually.
There's always
I
room
like it.
for popcorn, Chris.
There's always room for popcorn. You'll have a social life. If you're an athlete, you'll have a social life. For the most part, athletes are very popular around school.
Sure.
They don't have to be at every party. They can be at, into the scene, and people are going to recognize you and things are going to be friendly. So your social life, even at school, is going to be fine. It usually is. I don't know very many athletes who are recluses at their school.
Right.
But I do know, the balance is what it is. It's part of what you have to do. I don't think that, at any point that there's an athlete out there that's going to say, because you have to be stimulated by both. And like I said before, you have to make that your priority. For any kid who makes that their priority, their studies and their sports at the same time, they can accomplish anything. And that's just the rules. That's just part of what happens. Kids, the brain is like a sponge. You can do what you set your mind to. You can do what you're capable of if you do it. And the physical gifts are all, God-given. I can't teach speed. I can't teach height. I can't teach ability. And you have to study. And for the kids that don't have it quite as much as the other, you have to study for that as well. And so you have to study angles. You have to study things that are going to make you better. Because not everybody that I've ever played with is a great athlete. They've studied the game and they've become that person.
Right.
And that's part of it as well.
That kind of describes me on the ice hockey rink, where I absolutely suck, but I know the game, so I kind of know where to be, and I score my goals because I happen to be whatever. So that's
right. No, that's and that's what happens. Clearly, there's a lot of guys out there that you would think that weren't that good, and all of a sudden they end up being in the right place. And if you're taught the right thing and you listen correctly, and you're in the right place, you'll score your goals, and that's what happens.
Perfect. Well stated.
Yeah.
So look, I know that we have a certain amount of limitation on our time, but I want to knock through a couple of things that I think are really important that I think the listeners will love to hear about. I love to hear about, and so on. So give me like I hate to condense the NFL stuff into a shorter chunk, but I want to talk also. Look, you and I both are super passionate about what happens to NFL players when they leave their game and they make the transition. So I want to jump into that in a minute. But what I do want to hear about real quick, though, is tell me about the moment that you found out that you were playing professional football.
Well, the first day, the draft is 2 days. And back in those days, it was 12 rounds. So it was the first, I think, 5 rounds. And then the rest was going on the next day.
Yeah.
And the day of the draft, I went over a buddy's house of mine, and he had it all on the big screen, and we just kind of waited around. And I remember the Redskins telling me that they were going to draft me in like the 4th round. And I said, okay, I'm happy about that, because I was one of the smaller players in the draft. And I'd obviously gone over that. But it was me and another guy were the only guys that were under 170 pounds. It was 167 pounds at the time. And so that hurt me, because everybody thought I was too small to play in this league with all these giants.
Right.
And so the first day of the draft came, and the first day of the draft came and went. And I thought to myself, I'm not getting drafted. This is the same old thing as when I was coming out of high school, the same old thing as junior college, the same old thing as college. And so I remember not being able to sleep after the first night. And I got in my Volkswagen Bug and drove back to campus out of USC, because I was at my mom's house. And came back at about, I don't know, maybe 4 o'clock in the morning, because the number that they had for me was my mom's number, so that, I could pick up the phone. Obviously, back in those days, we didn't have cell phones yet. And so I slept on the couch, didn't know what I was going to do, thought about, because I was fully engulfed at that point. And then the phone rings at like 7 a.m. And It was my buddy, and he said, "You get drafted yet?" And I was like, "Man, hang up the phone. I need to get off the line." You know how you're not thinking about call waiting or anything. And so, and so I hung up the phone. I go, "No," and hung up the phone. And then as I hung up the phone, it rang again. And I picked up the phone, and they said, "Chris, this is the Indianapolis Colts." And they said, "We're going to draft you. Within, are you still there?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, they said, "We're going to draft you after a couple of picks." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I'll be sitting here waiting." And said, "Great." I hung up the phone again. As I hung the phone again, it rang again. I was thinking it was another one of my friends, asking if I had gotten drafted. I picked up the phone. I said, "Hello." And they said, "Chris, this is the Buffalo Bills. We just drafted you." And they said, "Aren't you happy?" And I was like, "Great." Not the fact that it was the Bills. It was just the fact that I felt like it took so long for somebody to draft me, and I didn't know what to do with it being Buffalo, because I just didn't expect it to be the Buffalo Bills. I expected it to be somebody out west. And so they said, "Well, the press is going to call you back and do all this stuff and do that stuff." And so it's funny. There's very few things that I remember about that day, but I do remember thinking to myself, somebody missed out. Just like when you see those first rounders on TV and they don't get drafted, and they get 20 million instead of 25 million, and they get mad. Well, I was I was mad just because the fact that I think somebody took too long, and I think I deserved more. And I was just pissed. And the first thing I thought was, I got to do what I do. And after all the press called me and we talked for a while and talked about what we were going to do and what was going to happen, I remember my coach calling me back, and he said, "You're a seventh round pick. You still have to make the team." And so then there was this other thing, it was like, stop, wait a minute. I didn't make the team. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't the fact that I was a pro athlete. It was the fact that I still had to make the team. So the pressure never lets up. You know what I'm saying? And so it was just kind of crazy, and I just had to prepare myself to get going.
Well, yeah, I guess if your name's not Tom Brady or something, or I shouldn't even say that on this podcast. Strike that from the record.
You just did.
Damn it. Or Eli Manning.
Eli Manning.
But anyway, or Saquon. But anyway, any of these guys, but you're absolutely right. Like with the NFL, I think people out there that are watching on TV and so on, they kind of, when they watch the game on Sunday, all they see are the 53 or whatever on the roster, but they see the start 11 on each side and so on. And they don't really know everything that goes into just showing up that day, like the everything else. It's different than, let's say, professional baseball, where there's spring training, but then you're playing 162 games and you show up and you play your game and so on. But football, it's a whole different story. And you've got to basically, as you said, make the team. And then when you make the team, then you got to make the starting lineup, or or you're maybe
you got to do everything. Yeah, everything.
It's a constant battle.
Well, yeah, and that's what's crazy. So when you make the team and you go to training camp, they bring in, and at that time they brought in 85 guys.
Wow.
And so they have to cut the roster down to 53. And so there's obviously all the guys that were there last year in your position. There's all the rookies that they're bringing in. So they brought in, I don't know, 5 or 6 in your position. And what people don't realize is that every week they bring in new guys to work out on your day off, just in case you're not doing well, to take your position. So it's not just what everybody sees out in the field. And even in, what they don't realize in baseball is, there's rookie league, there's AA, single A, triple A, Mexican leagues, international leagues, always somebody looking to take your spot, no matter what your situation. Yeah. And so it's not just what it is. And so the funny thing about my team at Buffalo was we had some pretty good guys, and I was probably the 3rd or 4th defensive back taken. There was more other defensive backs that were taken before me.
Yeah.
By the time we ended up in the training camp, and here's what's really crazy. Brian Jordan was on that team. He was drafted ahead of me as a defensive back, who ended up at Atlanta and ended up at the Braves and St. Louis Cardinals. Spent an enormous amount of time in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
But he was drafted ahead of me, and they released him. I was the only guy to make the team on defense.
Really?
That's crazy, right? Yeah, the only one. And so it was the time because Buffalo was making the Super Bowl run. And so they felt like they only needed pieces. They didn't need to draft a whole bunch of guys and start over. And so that's what made it more difficult. So there was two guys that made the team that year. And one was a guy named Don Beebe,
Yep.
the speedster who ended up at Green Bay as well.
Yeah.
And myself. And that was it.
Wow.
And yeah.
Well
It's pretty
done.
incredible. Yeah. Pretty incredible.
Well done. So,
Yeah.
so now I want to jump ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, you played for a few years, and we can talk about that. But what I want to really start talking about is more so, I guess. I mean, you had. Well, wait a minute. I guess I have to ask you. Give me a sense of what you consider to be your favorite moment in a game. What was your big highlight that you yourself got the most out of? It doesn't mean the fan did or the whatever did, but you yourself, like, what was your moment where you were like, yes, this was great?
Well, I have a few of them. If one in particular comes to mind, I was on Monday Night Football in Seattle, and the starter got hurt. Got the wind knocked out of him, so they have to put me in. And me being in the game, I can't hear the announcers or anything, but I go in the game, and they're going at me right away because it was towards the end of the half. They were in 2-minute offense. They're going after me right away, and they do. And Benny Blades goes to catch the ball, and I wish I could show the visual, but the ball, and I think it's Jim Zorn was a quarterback, so this is it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so the ball comes right in the end zone. They have me burned. I'm a step behind, and he's catching the ball, and it goes right into his pocket. But what I did is come up, never looked at him, never turned around, looking straight at his chest, came up through his hands, hit the ball before he could grasp it, popped it up in the air, and knocked it away. And the announcers had to look at it like 2 or 3 times. It was Frank Gifford at the time and whoever else was on there. And they looked at it and they said, well, wait a minute. I mean, they thought he dropped the ball. And then they said, well, wait a minute. This is a fantastic play by this, rookie cornerback, blah, 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 blah. And they did the whole spiel on TV. And then at the end, he goes, that's one of your Trojans, isn't it, Frank Gifford? Because
Yeah.
Frank Gifford's a USC guy. And so that was, one of those moments where it was cool. And then I came back to the bench and the coaches were like, that was fantastic. That was unbelievable, And then you feel like at that point, and this was my rookie year, maybe, I don't know, 4th or 5th game. And then at that point, I felt like I belonged and was going to make this kind of, make this a regular thing outside of the first check that I got. But that was a surreal moment for me.
That is great. That's a great
Yeah.
story. So let's shift ahead a little bit because look, a lot of what I do, and this, Chris, already, is I work with a lot of retired athletes and really help them with their transition out of the game and into their great next journey, whatever it might be. And I wanted to hear a little bit about your situation from the perspective of, at what moment did you, first of all, we'll talk about what moment did you realize, I may be done, or this may be the last, was there a moment that stood out where you said, you know what, it's time to go? Or was it something that was, tell me about your experience with that.
Well, I don't think it's ever an athlete's, an athlete never says it's time to go. There's about 1% that said that.
Yeah.
For the most part, everybody, the league says it's time to go, or, whatever your organization. And so once I was released by the Houston Oilers back at that time before they went to Tennessee. And once I was released by the Houston Oilers, I knew it was going to be hard to come back because I was released sort of towards the end, the beginning of the season. And so at that point, you're not used to anybody else's system. And so it was hard for guys to come in, especially after, being in the league for 5.5 years. I had a torn Achilles tendon in my 3rd year in the league. And so people are skeptical of you health-wise. And what people don't realize is every year there's 14,000 other kids eligible to be in your position. And outside of the sheer number of guys that they have, you have a league of other free agents going from one team to the other. And so those positions get filled very, very quickly, and they're younger. And when you have a 23-year-old kid, you can start over. The other thing is they make less money, and so people don't realize it as well. It's a money factor as well.
Yeah.
So when you're a veteran in the league and you make too much money, there's such thing as making too much money. So you have to realize that this is going to end probably sooner than you think. And I was one of those guys that never thought it wasn't going to end, because I could still play. And so I would just work out, and my agent would call me during the season. I'd say 1996 or 95 or 96. And he just said, the clock is ticking. It's going to be time to stop very, very soon. So what I've learned from me and other players is that there's a situation that kind of mentally hits you that is really, really hard to overcome. And I think every single football player that I've known, something has happened. And to try to control that situation is the most difficult thing in the world, because here's something that you've done since you were 9 years old for most of us, or at least since high school on up, and you've dedicated your life to it, and all of a sudden it's over, and you really don't know what to do, because you really don't plan on doing something after football. You feel like that football is going to be in your life forever, but the reality of it is that football is going to end, and you're going to have to find something to do. So making the transition, I think the first thing that you have to do is get help, get a psychologist, psychiatrist, whoever. No, maybe for a lot of players that's true. I think mentally you have to decide that you want to do something, that you have to leave the game alone. It takes a lot of time. 100% of the time that I've been around players, I found that it takes a long time for them to make the mental transition, not the physical transition. I don't care if they have something going on. I got other companies going on here. I've got this going on there.
Right.
Doesn't matter. The mental transition is the hardest thing to be able to overcome. And that was the hardest thing for me because I really didn't have a plan. I just signed a new deal the year earlier for, another 2 years. And I felt like I would put myself in a good financial position, and I could do, some of the things that I thought I wanted to do. But it didn't work out that way. So, 2 months later, I find myself out of football forever. So you go from making, and at the time, $250,000 a year to nothing. And you got nothing in your physical body is not quite what it was. So mentally, you have to try to find some kind of avenue. And I still can't explain it to this day. That's going to make you or allow you to make the transition.
Well, look, that's the biggest challenge, Chris, is that it's almost not almost, but it's almost impossible to replace the adrenaline you feel on the field and the camaraderie and all that went into being a professional athlete. But even before that, a student athlete when you're at USC and Nebraska before that, and even in high school, there's something to be said. And you know what? Military veterans go through this also, where they're with their platoon for so long, and then suddenly they're out.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, what do I do next? What's next for me? And to me, the most important thing to do is, and I know you'll agree with me, is even while you're playing, it's okay to admit to yourself that, you know what, I might be out of this game at 25 or 27 or 30 or whatever the age is, but I need to start thinking about, well, what else can I do? What else do I love doing? And develop another interest. If it's something to do with fashion, or being in front of the media and broadcasting, or if it's understanding the food industry, or if it's doing financial work or whatever it might be, or legal or something, but start developing something else that you have. And it doesn't mean you need to start training for your next career while you're still playing completely, but just start learning something. Get, as I said earlier, activate that biology or whatever it was part of your brain, because again, when you are playing a sport and you know that you've got a potential plan B when things end, it's almost like a mental check that you can kind of knock off and not worry about. And you can play your game with sort of one less thing to be stressed about, right? And you can, when you play stress-free and not worried about some of the other things, your performance on the field increases. When your performance on the field increases, your career extends longer. So there's so many benefits to being prepared today for something that's going to happen, whether it's
Yeah.
tomorrow or 10 years down the road.
Yeah, sure. And sure, there's more. So the thing about today's game is that there's more information out there about what you can do. In those days, I think that, coming from the old timers, that's all we thought about. We were consumed about our job, what we were supposed to do week to week, being what's your performance. If you're on your off time, you're watching film. If you're, on your weekends, you're resting mentally because you've just gone over, this mental mind thing. And so you're consumed by what you're doing. And really, and the guys that make all the money don't have to worry about a second career, because they can go into broadcasting right after football. The Tony Gonzalez's, or the
Right.
or the Mannings, or whatever. They can do whatever, and then they have financial security, and they have people around them. It's the guys that are not financially set for life that have to worry about everything after football. But those are the guys that have to worry about keeping a job, and they're totally consumed about what they want to do. So trying to find that area between there, I think, is the hardest part for any of those guys who are athletes. And I'm not talking to you about the Tom Brady's or the Drew Breeses and stuff. I'm talking to you about the Chris Hales, the Rodney Hamptons of the world. I had to make a Giants reference at some point, the Jared Bunches, so that those are the guys that are going to need the help along the way.
Well, you're absolutely right, because again, the public's perception is that every single NFL player makes a gajillion dollars, and that's further from the truth. It's, you got sort of the top 2, 3, 5% that do make a very comfortable amount, but there's the guys that are on the practice squad. They're the guys that maybe play one season, and one of the things that I thought was a really good. And I told you about it when I was out in LA a few weeks ago, and I was at this event. One of the guys that works for the Rams was doing a demonstration for the rookies that were in camp, where what they do is they bring in $1 million in cash, $1 million with they got the armored car there and everything, $1 million in cash. They put it on the table, and they sit all the rookies around that table. And basically they say, hey, rookies, this is, you're getting the nice big fat contracts, right? And they're all excited, and well, then the guy says, well, here's what happens to your $1 million. And he takes a little stick or whatever it is, and he shovels off $450,000 and takes it away. And he shovels off $20,000 for the agency fee, another $20,000 for this and that. And they're left with basically $100,000 or something. And he says, this is really what you have to spend, not this $1 million. And of course, it's sobering for them, but it's a critical lesson, right? So financial literacy is so important. But so I want to jump ahead real quickly to, so two separate things. Number one, I guess it sounds like you didn't necessarily, when you came out of the sport, you didn't have the resources that are available today and sort of to help you out. But but what are some of the recommendations you might have if there's we're now heading into training camp for this upcoming season. For some of the guys that end up playing, but then they end up getting cut, or something happens and they can't play, or they get injured for the year, or whatever it might be. Give me a couple things that you would advise them to do.
Nowadays, what I can see, and I have to think about it still, because it's still very difficult for the guys that are making the transition out of football, because it happens in college as well as it happens in pros. And the first thing I could think about is reaching back to your college, going back to the people that you were involved with in college, because you understand there's so many avenues out of college, and what college students are doing in people, especially at a school like mine, like at USC, is it's supposed to be a family, and you're supposed to be able to say, hey, let's go back to the people that are involved in the school, that knew who I was when I was playing. They appreciated my play, getting to know them, so on and so forth. And there could be something that they could get involved with that way. So the first thing I would say was go back to your school, see if there's a program that has a transitional situation, because to be honest with you, even the kids in college, there's only going to be about 4 or 5 at a major college. There's only going to be about 4 or 5 of those kids that go pro anyway. And so the rest of them have to really find their way. And so they should have a program for that, so that you can talk to people and advisors and see what you do in that situation. And even if you're a pro football player, That's something that you should do as well. Go back to your school. Let's say you put in 4 or 5 years. They haven't forgotten who you are. Go back to that school. Look for folks that are hiring people, or at least want to give people a chance. Listen, their doors are down. They're not, they're very receptive at that point when they remember who you are, and they know you're a football star, and start there.
Right.
And that's the best way I can say to do things.
Good. Well, I mean, look, that's a great piece of advice. What I would also say though is, and I tend to be a grumpy old man when it comes to this stuff. I'm a grumpy old man when it comes to lots of stuff. But
Yeah.
One of the things I talk about in my book is really, yes, the Alumni Network is critical to leverage, but I'm not always as much of a fan of what some of the universities offer, because I feel that they do a sort of the check the box kind of mentality of,
Sure.
if you go
I
back
do
to
agree
the
with that.
school, they teach you, they say, well, here's how you do a resume, and then just send it out to lots of places, see what happens. And then, they'll give you a couple interview tips on, how to dress and how to this and that. But to me, it's such like antiquated old school advice. And my opinion is that it's essential to really grow your network of key influencers, of decision makers, of people that will really make an impact for you down the road. And
Yeah.
I was just speaking to a Major League Baseball player yesterday who he'd just been out a couple of years. And I said to him, look, the critical thing is you can use the fact that you were a professional athlete to open some doors. They're not going to hire you because you're an athlete, but they'll certainly meet with you because you have that background.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
then from there, it's all about talking to them and about what you bring to the table as a former athlete that a lot of times the non-athletes don't understand that you have.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not going to do all the easy work for you. I'm going to quiz you on this, Chris. So in your opinion, as an athlete, what are some of the things, list me like 3 or 4 things that you think that an athlete brings to a potential hiring manager, a company?
Sure.
List a couple of things that athletes have that maybe non-athletes don't have.
Yeah. Well, I think the work ethic is there.
Yeah.
Understanding that, through college, you weren't just an athlete, you were a student athlete. So you did both your studies. It's hard enough to do studies alone and play sports and still maintain, good grades, eligibility, so on and so forth. The work ethic is number one to me. And that's what I think. Teamwork too is another one. So the teamwork, you have to be willing to work with others at a high level. And that's the second biggest thing for an athlete. And that's what I think when looking at an athlete or hiring an athlete, you have to believe there's not, the pettiness is not there. You have to, this is something that they instill in you, that this is what you have to do.
Right.
I'm trying to think of something else.
Well, wait a minute. Tell me a little bit about,
Yeah.
I've seen some pictures of you in front of a microphone with headphones on. What's
Yeah,
that?
the broadcasting thing. Yeah. Well, I was going to say relationships, I think, are another thing that
Yep.
you have to be able to create good relationships, have good rapport with people, have to be able to get
Yep.
along with people. So whatever situation you're in, it will be easier for you to understand who they are. So as a professional athlete, obviously with people being around you all the time, you have to be able to get along with people, and to be able, you have a crew of people, and understanding that, and that's part
Right.
of football too. And so, yeah, it led into the broadcasting thing.
Well, I don't mean,
The
by the way, the broadcasting
Yeah,
thing per se as a job, but more so what athletes have, and a lot of times they don't realize they have this, is because they've been since an early age performing in front of crowds, or giving interviews, or whatever it is, or just speaking to audiences.
yeah,
Athletes have an ability that 95, 98% of the average person is terrified to be in front of a camera, in front of a stage, or on a stage, or in front of a big crowd of people. So I believe that athletes, sort of don't realize that they can be doing things like media relations, public or
sure,
PR, all kinds
yeah,
of marketing and things, because they're not afraid of being in
yeah,
front of people and sort of talking like that. So it's not, I mean, look, a lot of athletes get into sales, which is great, but there's so many other parts of it they can get into. I also think what I always say about an athlete is that it's the ability to also pivot at a second's notice, to change gears. I mean, for example, in football, you've learned a playbook, but you've also know that when you're seeing, in your case, defending a receiver and the receiver suddenly does this instead of that, you've got to pivot immediately.
That's
And
true.
a manager loves that in an employee, the ability to be logical and think logically and understand that, okay, this just happened. We need to do this now. Right.
Yep.
There's so many, look, and you saw, I think you've cracked my book a little bit, maybe. There's going to be a quiz, like I said,
Yeah.
but there's a whole list of things in there that really talk about all the things that athletes sometimes take for granted that they don't realize they have, that a hiring manager would love to. I mean, athletes make amazing hires in a variety of ways. And, that's the one thing that I'm so passionate about is really, if you start, if an entity like, for example, the NFL, whether it's Players Association, Players Trust, whoever it is, Retired Players Association, all these other associations that are meant to help the athletes, if they start focusing on giving the retired athlete the understanding of what they have, what they bring to the table, and restore that confidence that they felt on the field, and they restore it in, let's say, the conference room, right?
Sure.
Where they suddenly now feel like, you know what? I bring a lot more to the table than I thought I had. I'm going to kick ass now, and I'm going to start meeting people that'll be interested in wanting to talk to me, hire me, get involved with me, and everything.
I agree.
I mean, that's
Agreed.
What do you think, Chris? Yay?
I agree 100%. No, 100%. And it's a lot of those things all make sense. Game analogies that you made, yeah, they're spot on. And people don't realize that, it's not just about you being an athlete in the name and all that stuff. There's a lot that comes with it. Being able to think on your feet, spontaneously do things, create relationships, so many other things that you can lend to the table that people don't realize. And that's what they have to concentrate on when finishing up with football.
Chris, man, you know what? You and me, we're going to start this whole thing. We're going to help a ton. We're going to help like 200,000 athletes. No. Well, I think look, we had a great lunch, long lunch a few weeks ago. And you epitomize sort of the whole concept where you said you've got to be friendly and nice to everybody, and you do. And you're certainly that. I don't know if it's that whole Southern California where everybody's like really friendly all the time. Here in New York, it's like we're always suspicious of everybody.
Too intense.
Come on.
Yeah, go to Hawaii for a couple of days. It'll get worse.
It's funny. I honeymooned there, and you're right. After a while, you're kind of like, all right, come on, let's go. Things have to happen out here. Like, dude, man.
They don't happen.
Yeah.
They don't happen.
Anyway, so tying together a couple of things here, because I know you got to roll in a minute, but this has been a great conversation as always.
We could do 2 shows. We'll do 2 shows.
Wow. Don't get cocky on me.
Yeah.
It's not easy to get on my show, Chris. It's at least
I'll go after Eli Manning.
Yeah. You know what? You won't have time for a couple more years. All right. Maybe one more year. I'm doing the sign of the cross right there. Anyway. We got some tools now. I don't even know what I'm talking about. All right. Anyway, but look, Chris, I really appreciate your time. You're right. We can go on forever with this stuff, but the bottom line is that, I think we both feel the same way, that, we're both very passionate about the idea of really helping these guys make that transition, because so many of them do struggle. And, if there's a way that we can, really get more of that message out, whether it's to the variety of people that are in place to support these guys, or if it's simply doing it on our own or getting just more information out there, I think that's essential. And I think that, I know that you're doing some work with the NFL right now, and you're talking about getting back into the broadcasting thing. And I know you play at least 4 or 5 rounds of golf a day or something like that. But all right, but listen, I'm going to throw just a couple minutes left. I'm going to throw a couple of quick questions at you, and just rapid fire answer kind of a thing. I call it
Sure.
Hit Your Mark segment. And just first a football related thing. Who would you say hit you the hardest?
Hit me the hardest? You know what? I'm not sure, because when I got hit the hardest, I didn't know who it was. I don't know who it was.
All right.
Well, no, there's a number of players that are. I mean, everybody seems like it's over 230 pounds, and some of the players I can remember a tight end on Dallas Cowboys. I don't know who he was, but he was probably, I don't know, 267 pounds or so,
Yeah.
and about 6'5", going full speed. I don't even know his name, and I remember him hitting me pretty hard. I don't know what happened after that, but I remember just a brief moment of contact. That's about it.
The name on the back of the jersey was a little blurry, I guess.
Yeah, right. Well, no, I saw his helmet. I saw the front of him. It was like a train.
And he was the conductor, right?
Yeah, right.
Anyway, well, all right, good non-answer, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And so today, as we speak, are you forced to root for the Rams, I guess, or do you ever root for other teams, or what's your?
Well, I work for the league, so I don't necessarily work for the Rams. I work the Rams games.
Okay.
I work compliance
Right.
for the Rams games, but I've enjoyed being around the Rams. I enjoy Coach McVay and what he brings to the team. I was there when Jeff Fisher was there as well, and it's a night and day attitude adjustment for the Rams. The players are fun to be around. I do the opponent in those games, but I see the Rams, pretty much every weekend. So you get to know all the guys, and I've enjoyed being around them. So yeah, I could say I was a Rams fan.
Now, do you are you the guy that, because you're handling the opponent, do you do this stuff like calling the hotel at like 2 a.m. and making sure they pick up it, and you
No.
put like hot peppers in their pancakes and stuff like that? Come on, you can admit it.
Yeah, put some. Yeah, no.
No one's listening to this podcast. It's okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I enjoy every team that I'm around. Seattle comes to town, and Pete Carroll's fantastic, and there's a few teams that I don't know guys on, and then I just kind of mull around. But every team has been fantastic to me. I haven't met anybody that I didn't like. So it's just been a fun experience all the way around.
Got it. Okay. So now switching gears again. I know you do play some golf here and there. I mean, there's 1,000 pictures of you at these golf tournaments. So I'm assuming you're, I don't know, probably a scratch golfer. Who knows what?
I'm not. I'm still terrible. I don't even know how you get better at golf. I'm terrible.
Well, it's called the hand wedge.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. I'll throw the ball in the hole.
But out of all the players that you've played with, right? Who's the worst you've ever seen?
Who's the worst?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Maybe Charles Barkley. Maybe Charles.
Play with Charles?
Yeah, I played with Charles.
Yeah,
years ago, but I mean, I think he's getting better now. But when I played with him, he was awful. However, I'm going to give you one. The best player that I played with is, probably the most fun is Lawrence Taylor.
LT, huh?
LT is he can play. He's really good. And he's an absolute blast to be around. So I'll just throw that Giants deal
now. But I'm assuming that none of these guys ever gamble on the golf games, right?
Well, they do. Yeah, I don't because I'm not good enough. But once I become a steady stick, I'll put my money out there as well. 50 cents a hole.
There you go. I know, right? You got to start low and work your way up.
Keep it low.
And then if you had just out of curiosity, because I know out in LA, you guys are we'll say eclectic and stuff like that. I don't know if that's the right word, but if you had a chance to have a pet that was not a dog or a cat, what would it be?
It wasn't a dog or a cat. In LA?
Well, whatever.
It's realistic. House. Whenever. Okay. I'd have a lion.
Ah.
No, I'd have a cheetah.
A cheetah.
Yeah. Because
I don't know how much property you have, but you're probably going to need more property.
Right. Your animal, your pet is usually like you. Yeah, so it would be a cheetah. It would be a cheetah. There you go.
A bald cheetah.
Yeah.
Well, look, I really appreciate your time. Look,
thank you, my friend.
You're doing just by chatting with us today. I mean, I want to start doing sort of much more of this whole, let's get the word out to a lot of the guys and I say guys all the time because right now it's only guys in the NFL, but men and women athletes that really need a lot of help as they make the transition. And I think it's going to be guys like you, Chris, that really can step forward and help out. I can only do so much, and I didn't play professional sport, but I think that the more professional athletes that have played that can really help the current ones and almost act as a mentor and someone to turn to is great. So, thanks again for your time today.
You're welcome, my friend.
Blast to talk to. And have a great rest of your day. I know it's really early out there. I think it's like 4 a.m. or something. So you're gonna go out for like a 10-mile run and then lift some weights and do whatever that stuff is called.
No, I have a meeting that I'm late for.
All right, sorry. Go ahead.
An actual meeting, right?
All right. Big shot. Anyway, thanks again, Chris. We'll talk soon. All right,
my friend.
All right. See ya. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for joining us today on this episode of Make Your Mark podcast. The goal of the podcast is to help you find ways to make your mark, to succeed in life, and to jump past your competition. Be sure to leave me a review on iTunes and Stitcher, and subscribe to be the first to hear new episodes. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email, mark@markmoyer.com, and I'll get back to you right away. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.